Hi, this is Quentin Langley from Brandjack News. Just a few reflections on the past week. Um, Obviously, the News of the World issue came to a head again with Rupert and James Murdoch giving evidence to the House of Commons. Very interesting. Seemed to be going quite well for James Murdoch, rather less so for Rupert Murdoch, until the entire thing was brandjacked by Wendy Deng's intervention. She emerges as something of a hero, with almost everyone expressing high opinions of her. That seemed to dominate a lot of the coverage the following day, which is quite an interesting thing, and one has to assume wasn't planned like that, but certainly came to dominate people's thinking about the issue the following day. Now, I've been on China National Radio talking about the News of the World issue and mentioning, of course, Wendy Deng, who has become something of a hero in China as well as in Britain. So that's now on the site, so you can listen to my appearance on China National Radio there. Uh, Better if you can speak Chinese, though. You can just about hear my voice in the background, but of course the interpreter is speaking over me. So if you don't speak Chinese, it may be a little difficult to follow. So, what else? The British political scene has turned around quite markedly. Ed Miliband did seem to be taking good advantage of this whole discussion around the News of the World and around News International, and had actually built up quite a reputation behind himself, but seems to have blown it, with most people taking the view that he performed rather poorly in the House of Commons debate, whereas David Cameron really rose to the occasion, which is quite interesting. That's the third time he's done that. He established his reputation and took the leadership of the Conservative Party in 2005 by making a remarkable speech. He persuaded Gordon Brown to cancel an early election at a time when Labour seemed to be doing quite well in the polls in 2007 by making a remarkable speech. And now he's turned around a situation which was looking a little difficult for him, again by making a remarkable speech. Now, the situation was never going to be too bad for him. Let's face it, the thing that most upsets people in the UK, the hacking of Millie Dowler's phone, happened in 2002. Tony Blair was the Prime Minister at the time. The botched police investigation was in 2009 when Gordon Brown was Prime Minister. It's a little difficult to blame David Cameron for either of those things. But some in the media and the Labour Party were having a pretty good go. And it was interesting that it took him and the Conservative Party quite a while to respond. When he did so extremely effectively. And that set me thinking about the role of making speeches in politics. It's something I've been mulling for quite a while. David Cameron and Barack Obama have both established themselves as political leaders principally through making speeches. Barack Obama made his name in 2004, and every time his campaign ran into trouble in 2008, he made a speech. There was an issue over his pastor who was making some quite outrageously anti-American and racist remarks, and this was picked up, and Barack Obama made a very effective speech about that and turned the issue around. So now, most people who don't follow politics that closely would say surely that's always been in the politician's armoury, making speeches. Well, yes, it was the principal way in which politicians communicated with voters in the 19th century. With the rise of mass media, and especially with television in the second half of the 20th century, it became increasingly irrelevant. What people were consuming mostly was sound bites from speeches rather than a speech as a whole. So if you think back to Barack Obama's 2004 speech to the Democratic National Convention, there was a huge crescendo that he built up around, that there were no red states and there's no blue states, there's the United States. Now, this was very effective on his part, but it's the sort of thing that would not have been reported just a few years ago. With 24-hour news, but most especially with social media, that has changed. We're moving on from the day of the soundbite towards the day of the socially recommended segment of a speech. If you're one of my connections on LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook, and I send you a section of a speech and say, this is something which I think you will be interested in because I know you, that has a lot more impact than a journalist selecting a few seconds of a speech that might well be of interest to the population as a whole. The socially recommended segment of a speech has that power that the soundbite did not. Now, what that means is people are now consuming speeches in different ways. And suddenly, the art of speech making, the art of rhetoric, is becoming very important in politics again, in a way that it hasn't been for some years. It's only 10 years since we had an election in the UK, which the Conservative Party lost, when it had been led for 4 years by one of the most gifted orators in British politics, William Hague. Yet the election result was disastrous, coming off the worst result the Conservatives have ever had. The Conservatives made a net gain of 1 seat from Labour under William Hague's leadership. If making speeches counted as much in 2001 as it does today, or as much as it had done in 1901, William Hague would have won the election. As it happens, he did disastrously badly. So here's a thought. If making speeches is now that much more important again in politics, is it going to become more and more important in commerce? I think so. I think it's going to be the thing that marks out a leader from a group of executives. I think as organizations increasingly succeed on the way they wage the war for talent, I think you will find socially recommended segments of speeches that commercial leaders make being sent around on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. People talking about how their boss has inspired them. And that's what's going to lead to other people thinking, yeah, that's the guy I want to work for, or that's the woman I want to work for. So these organizations that are going to win the war for talent are going to do so because of leadership success and something that will be expressed more and more in terms of making speeches. So those are my thoughts for this week. That's Quentin Langley for Brandjack News, signing off.